Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you very much for coming and seeing what craziness we're going to talk about today. Real quick, these live streams are demonetized. We don't make money doing this, um, more especially this one, due to the sensitive nature of the topics that we're going to be discussing. I'll hit a few headlines that I'm kind of paying attention to. Of course, I'm not going to hit everything in the world that's going on news wise, but just some particulars. And then we're going to get into the meat of what the World Health Organization has now said is a global risk of a pandemic for monkeypox. Hoping this being demonetized, we'll be able to say words like COVID and monkeypox and not have this knocked off the air anymore. It seems like YouTube's kind of gone down on that procedure, so hopefully we'll be able to get through this. Um, I have a very long document to read, and I want to read it in its entirety because it reminds me of Event 201 with the COVID outbreak of 2020. And this one is kind of following the same lines. Now, during COVID 2020, I was still operating in the role as a law enforcement officer for the federal government. We were practicing all the lockdown procedures, wearing masks, wearing gloves, spraying Lysol on everything, keeping 6 foot distance between everybody. We all know that to be a farce. We all know that to be a lie now. And then also, all the other altercations and tragedies that came about after 2020. In 2020 it was a psychological event. And it was really, for me, I think it was a beta test for all nations and all people to see what the government can get away with. Now, me and my associate Dave Hodges from The Common Sense Show, the co-host on the Doug and Dave Intel Report, will be getting into this, I believe, tomorrow. And we're going to talk in real depth about this. But what they were able to get away with, the lockdowns, seeing who would lock down, who would not lock down, seeing what they could take off the market and what could be spiked, and see what people would panic buy. I think all these things are part of a beta test for a future operation. Now, for that future operation, Dave Hodges and I have associated the possibility of a bloodborne pathogen, the possibility of an extraordinarily viral agent, something that is epidemiologically extraordinarily dangerous. I think that what we see going on right now, I don't know. It kind of goes back and forth. When monkeypox first came out, like a year or two ago, everybody kind of laughed at it and said, "Ah, it's the degenerates' disease. They're the only ones having to worry about it." Well, the thing is if this is true, this conspiracy theory of gauging and tactics and seeing what people's reactions are, understand also that these same agencies who have vaccines for all of these same things, they play around with a lot of these viral agents. And we know that they manipulate them, they mutate them, they harness and grow them and sell them, and even sometimes bioterrorism also occurs. So, part of the strategy, the tabletop strategy that the WHO and other international agencies involved in health and security and surveillance looked into, was one of the possibilities of this being a zoonotic disease, a very kind of brand new disease, something that's happening within the elements of the biology of the animal specter, and then it um, crosses species barriers, and then now humans are able to contract it. Um, One of the most major things that we have as a government, at least from my experience, in my training in this, is that one of the things that we plan for the most and we're the least prepared for is Ebola. Now, Ebola is one of those things that I remember when we were working on the border, on the Mexican border, we would be getting safety briefs about all the stuff that was going on at the border. There was MERS, there was SARS, there was influenzas of all different types. There was the bubonic plague. There was certain insect-borne plagues like Zika virus, dengue fever. Then there was some weird bacteriological stuff going on, and then there was some weird, flesh-eating, down to the bone fungus crap that just scared the hell out of everybody. Um, and then there was Ebola. And Ebola was one of those things where, like, if you contract Ebola, your chances of dying are like 95%. Um, and then I believe there was 16 cases of Ebola in the United States, and most of those were here in Texas. At least one or two of those, I believe, was in San Antonio, where I was actually stationed at that time. So, and our response to it was mute. There wasn't very much response to it. I mean, on the border, I remember, we're going through these black nitrile gloves, right? We're going through nitrile gloves like it's nobody's business. And if you're smart, every time you deal with somebody, you put gloves on. And then when you're done dealing with those people coming across the border, you take those gloves off and you throw them away and you put brand new gloves back on. And then we would spray ourselves down with Lysol, spray our vehicles down with Lysol. Of course, we were around people who had lice. We were around people who had tuberculosis, people who had the vaccine-resistant polio. Um, and now one of the growing things around the hemisphere of where we live right now in the Western world is a vaccine-resistant polio. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that the WHO is currently monitoring as for pandemic emergencies. That being said, before we get any further into this, let's talk about preparing for pandemics. Ad hoc, I don't have anything prepared. I'm just going to tell you based off my knowledge, some of the things you need to consider for being prepared for a actual pandemic lockdown, a severe pandemic lockdown. You're going to think some of the things I'm about to say sounds ridiculous, but it's what I would do. I would consider strongly avoiding major populated areas as much as possible. I would have some sort of a quarantined area where I can decontaminate myself and remove exterior clothing and keep things like shoes or boots that would always be used for going outside. I would keep that outside. I'd never bring it inside. This is if there's an actual true contaminant, a real biological agent that's going on. Not only that, but you'll know that it's real when the government doesn't just say, hey, lockdown's enforced, the clubs and the strip clubs and the beer joints can be open, but all you churches shut down, and you have all of our elites going around and, hanging out at five-star diners and getting their hair done. No, what will actually happen is these people will go underground. The government will go underground. Something called continuity of operations of government will then be enacted. I was part of that at one point. It's a very secretive thing that you can actually get on and kind of read about. But what that does is it takes the government from being on the street level view so that you can walk in and you can talk to people at any point in time, to being completely locked down. So now there is no public access like Social Security. So for all of you who were on any type of Social Security benefits or needing access to the IRS back then, when the pandemics happened, it was extraordinarily complicated to be able to be seen by either of these two agencies, or maybe even something like SBA, Small Business Association, or Small Business Administration. Any of these types of agencies where the public has access to come in and talk to a federal employee then gets shut down. Well, if that's something that you have to do continuously, you need to make plans for that. What's so hard about that, especially with something like Social Security, is when you have thousands of people calling in a week because they didn't get their paychecks. They're immigrants who are been nationalized. They are now getting all their benefits set up, or you're trying to put somebody on your benefits or file death benefits. It grows extraordinarily complicated, and federal employees are some of the worst employees that I've ever met in my life, and literally have caused more of my police encounters than the public did. Most of the time, it was a government employee pissing off somebody, slamming the door on them, shutting their windows on them, saying, "Nope, you yelled, you cussed, you looked wrong at me. I'm denying any type of access to you in your benefits now." And then people become irate. I dealt with that for 10 years, technically 11 years. So you're not going to find, most likely, you're not going to find the next pandemic, the government, to be easily accessible. So have your ducks in a row. You may have to understand that if you're needing any type of benefits or to file things, I would do that now if you need to, and not continue to postpone and wait. Because the moment these lockdowns come, I believe, and a few of my other associates believe, that the next set of lockdowns that come are going to be probably much harsher in the response to a pandemic than it was the first time. And I don't care if Trump's in office, and I don't care if Kamala's in office. It doesn't really matter, because all of the agencies have lessons learned, as we call it in the government, have learned how to completely work without coming to work anymore, unless they're an agency that was like mine, Homeland Security, a law enforcement or intelligence-based agency, where you're still having to come to work every day. But for the most part, if you actually need, unfortunately, the government for anything, that's probably going away. From there, the federal government really has a small piece of it. Then let's talk about the state and local government. What did they do to you last time? How many businesses did they shut down last time? How many mom and pop stores were shut down, went out of business, and the major box stores were open? Okay. If you're now one of those small businesses where you get access to the public and that's how you are making a revenue, do you have any primary, secondary, tertiary plans for continuing keeping yourself open, or continuing your continuity of your operations and supplying your customer? After that, let's talk about we the people, and probably a few things we should start gathering right now. Now, this is no different than any other type of preparation that you should be doing. Um, I'm not going to really point you into anybody's direction. I'm just going to tell you as a basis things to consider. One of the things you need to be considering right now, me personally, based on what I see going on between the United States and China, is medicine. If you have the ability to get medicine, I would be getting that now. There are multiple different places out there where you can go. Some of them um, are supporters. There are advertisers. There are others out there. Jace Medical's one of them, where you can buy these prescription-based stuff and hopefully prepare for worst case scenario. After that, think about the little things. Okay, your Tylenol, your Advil, your ibuprofen. Think about the constant ailments going into the conditions of that season. Is it going to be winter that this happens? We'll prepare for influenzas, prepare for the common cold, cough syrup, stuff that you can get a hold of, even certain teas, herbal remedies that you can be doing and stocking up for now and preparing for that time frame. Um, I hate to say that the power grid is always an issue, but the power grid is always an issue. So, being that we're in the heat of the summer right now, but very quickly we'll be getting into autumn, you need to already, if you have a wood burning stove of any type or you got a fireplace, start getting your wood gathered, collected now. Don't wait. Um, After that, and I want to say that Joe Biden's warning of a dark winter echoes in my mind every now and then. What the heck did he mean by it? Why hasn't it happened yet? And when will it happen? if it was going to happen, I would say this year would be the year that it would happen. Um, we're on the potential of World War III. We're on the potential of this next pandemic going around the world and all the government lockdowns that come with it, which from there means restriction in travel, which I think will be one of the greatest things we'll see yet is a true restriction in travel. Um, I think that the simple preparations, food, water, medicine, whatever problems you have with your vehicle, try and get them fixed now. Whatever problems you need with your house fixed, try and get it fixed now, so that that way, when the pandemic starts, you you don't have more issues compiled on than what we already have. Most likely, if a pandemic happens again, they're going to shut down all the schools. Most likely, they're going to shut down all the freaking hotels. They'll shut down all the places where you want to go out and relax. They'll shut down all the stores again. I mean, you can see this boiling point with the American people and the annoyance of these policies from these rule makers and lawmakers. So another thing that we can already see, which happened in 2020, most likely it'll happen again, presidential race year, is some sort of large collective civil disobedience. Crime will most likely go up. You'll have civil disobedience. It's already kind of happening now. We'll mention a few things that'll be happening here at the DNC in Chicago, um, and also what happened in New York. But the amount of terrorists that have been caught coming across the border is exceedingly great, and yet no terror attack has happened. What does that tell you? If we are contacting so many, contacting mean face to face apprehensions and such, if we are making so many contacts with people from third world nations that are on the terrorism watch list, or at least on a threat list of some sort, and yet no terrorism has happened, in my mind, my conspiratorial mind, based off of just my pure experience, I would say that the buildup of something to occur during a time of pandemics may actually increase. And we know that the way these people operate, the elite, right? The people that we blame everything in the world on, they like to say, don't waste a good opportunity, right? Well, there's a great opportunity coming up soon for civil disobedience, lockdown procedures, taking away parts of your constitution. And anytime we talk about this, I always look back and I ask, what is the real end goal here? What are they actually trying to do to everybody? And one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is the eventuality of civil disobedience, civil unrest, pandemics that are uncontrollable. Imagine if COVID lockdowns lasted for 3 to 4 years. What would that do to our economy? What would that do to society sociologically? And where would we be at now if we continued the lockdowns and all the restrictions? I think in the future, with whatever comes next, instead of like a 1 year and then we'll go lax on everybody and everything goes back to normal, I could see it going for 2 years to 3 years to 4 years. Something that, let's say Trump gets in office, everybody's hero is now reelected, and everything that that man tries to do that is beneficial to the United States then gets completely scrubbed sideways because of pandemics and wars. Almost sounds like his first term. Except the caveat to that is that the wars then didn't work. The wars now are on so many different fronts. The Let's not say war completely, except for Ukraine, Russia, but the confrontations, the conflicts, and the ability of that conflict to happen is so high from the Middle East to Africa to the Caribbean to South America, domestically here, into Europe, civil unrest in Europe, possibly civil war in Europe, and then, China contesting us in the Pacific. And then we can't also forget what's going on with our dear friends, the Russians and Ukrainians. The moment Trump comes in, he says he's going to bring world peace. That's kind of confrontational words, kind of concerning, but that's his goal, is to end all wars, end all conflicts, and tell everybody to chill out. Let's just make some money for a while and appease the people. That was his goal the first time. It appears that'll be his goal the second time, if he's not locked up in September in Rikers Island. So let's say everything goes as planned. Trump does get elected. The 14th Amendment is never used against Trump. I think it's the 14th Amendment. But Trump gets put in office. Everything's honky-dory. And then, bam, the big scenarios start to unfold, one after another after another. All right. I think the eventuality of this is, not only does it deteriorate hope, but it also helps to fracture society. When you talk about psychological operations, which I believe COVID was more of a psychological operation than it was a physical operation. I believe psychologically it damaged more people than it killed. And I think that's probably accurate. Whatever happens next will be so fracturing. Because if you were this cabal of New World Order, satanic Luciferians, you want to put forth all the plans and measures to bring about the New World Order, right? You're preparing for your Antichrist to come about. Well, a few things have to happen. One of those things is money. Money has to go away, at least physical assets. And by physical assets, I don't mean by what you can trade personally. I mean by what is considered a physical asset by your country in reference of their revenue source. So the US dollar will then most likely go to the US digital dollar. And then it won't be a bank anymore. It'll be a bank by the Congress. So it'll be the United States Bank of the digital dollar. And that's kind of already in play. There's already things wrote up that's in the House for resolution to be passed, but it hasn't been passed, but it's in the House. All it has to do is, quick review, enact it. Bam, it's in the House. It gets passed by Senate. It's made law. And then everybody just has to comply. And then within just a matter of days to weeks, we could go from a cash-based society, which we still are, to a completely cashless-based society. Now, will that affect everybody? Yes. Will everybody care about it? No. There'll be plenty of people who do not care about it at all. And there'll be plenty of people who are completely freaked out who will say, well, I guess the mark of the beast comes next. And you'll have people who will do one of two things. You'll have a knee-jerk reaction. People will freak out. Major incidents will occur, regardless of whether or not you're involved of that or you're a victim of that. And then you'll have people who will be lackadaisical and complacent, and they'll just get steamrolled right over and they won't care at all. And then they will take the mark of the beast. I think what we see happening is a constant need to put the people under the influences of welcoming a new world order, welcoming a new way of thinking, a new way of operating. What one of the sayings was, you'll own nothing and you'll love it, right? You'll get your credits sent to you once a month, and buy everything from Amazon. It gets sent to you by drones, and that's your life. And eventually, if they can convince you to never go out and protest, if they can convince you to never pick up the hammer, John Henry, and make a hard-earned living, if they can convince you to be subservient, to eat the crickets, and make your money off of social media, I think they'll do that. I think they'll push you in every way possible to bring down the testosterone, to break up the family, to keep you away from anything that is considered a true individual right that would make you want to accept the willing accept for dangerous freedoms, as Thomas Jefferson used to say. And then we become a subservient slave class. And we're really, if you think about it, we're on the way there anyways. The whole world, for the most part, is on the way there. The problem with the world is the religions. Religions have a strict basis of things you can do and cannot do. And people are zealous religious people, and then you have people that are quasi could care less, but I believe that there's a something out there. Somewhere in the middle is the average person, right? Well, the average person can get pushed to either direction depending on the events going on around their area of operations, around their known world. Um, I'll say it like this: war. Was there a tremendous amount of suicide bombers and jihadis prior to us invading Iraq? No, there probably wasn't. Is there now a tremendous amount of jihadis and suicide bombers and plans and schemes? Yes. All right, because we pushed it. We made it happen. We created the boogeyman, and then we fed the boogeyman. Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas. Um, you see many of these different agencies around the world are all involved in some way, somehow, in standing up these little organizations. And don't forget China, our dear friends from China. They have had quite a lot of influence in violent Islamic extremism in the Middle East. So part of what I'm trying to convey to you is that there's a rung of scenarios that are going to get dinged, and depending on how quickly all these scenarios can happen is how quickly the world governments can say it's time for a shutdown, it's time for a lockdown, time to stop the internet, goodbye YouTube, Rumble, social media. And when the internet is stood back up, then everything is under control by them. I think that the 15-minute cities is part of this plan, the 20-minute neighborhoods. I think everything goes into the infrastructure of the Antichrist. Regardless of where you're at in your doomsday scenario, if we follow scripture, we know that it leads to that. No matter what, it leads to that. It leads to the infrastructure of the Antichrist and then the beast system. Okay. A lot of things got to happen between here and there, but they can happen very quickly at the same time. So preparing for all of that, I just go back to the basics. All right. One simple, easy thing to do, I will say this. They don't actually taste that bad. I buy them as regularly as possible. These little emergency food ration bars come in this little Mylar package. Let me see. There's 9 of these little squares. And each one of these little squares, I believe, is like 400 calories a square. So this whole thing is 3,600 calories. They're fairly cheap. You can easily keep them in a little pack inside your car or, somewhere in your survival, get out, whatever, bury them in the ground, whatever it is you want to do with them. But all you got to do is tear the package open and eat them. So, this is just in between getting from somewhere to the next place. I would eat this and not my actual survival food. Now, that's just me. The human body, for a period of time, really just needs calories. It doesn't matter. And I have friends who are on either side of this, and I know because they sell products, but it does not matter to me if it's non-GMO or GMO at this point. When it comes to survival, I'm going to eat whatever keeps the engine running. So food is fuel, engine's here, got to keep it running, because no matter what, I have to get me and my children and my wife and our possessions to the safe place. So I'll do whatever I have to make sure that happens. So, and honestly, I don't even consider taste anymore when it comes to food. Just drink water, eat food, and stay alive. That's those very quick 24, 48, 72 to 96-hour events that we talk about. Like, if you have to bug out for any reason, because all the lockdowns are coming, the invasion's coming, the grid's getting taken down, horrific storms are on the horizon. Most likely, when you go to flee, you have that window, that buffer, that from 0 hour to, let's say, 96 to 120 hours. So from 0 to 5 days, what am I looking at? What can my body sustain? And what do I actually need to function? For me, I know that honestly, all I really need, and this will be antithetical to a lot of you guys out there, but honestly, all I need, if the grid goes down and all this other crap happens, and my wife is going to yell at me for saying this, but she knows it already. Really, all I need is energy drinks and cigarettes and beef jerky and maybe some candy for that sugar for the insulin. After that, you know, it's water. Your body really just needs water. So pair that with this, and I'll be fine. Because all I need to do is get from A to B, and I don't want to tap into anything that my family needs to be eating. I can take care of myself. And based off my experience from combat operations to law enforcement operations here, domestically and within our territories, is you should be prepared to have no power. I've been in so many different situations where we had no electricity, where there was no running water. We had what we had, or it had to be brought in to us. Most likely, we're not going to have the luxury of having Big Brother government having a supply drop off point and a resupply point for us. So that old saying is like, be prepared, not only to self medicate, but be prepared to um, self evacuate. No one's coming for you when all this starts unless you have a prepared society that you're hanging around. You got your friends, you got your family, you got a community. Even there's so many different little problems if everyone's not on the same basis of preparedness. But us as Christians, let's get into this a little bit further. Us as Christians now, what do we do with our preparations? Do we accept people who need help? Do we give out, distro out stuff that we have that is extra to help other families, to help other people? Or do we hoard it and say, sorry, you should have filled your lamp up with oil? Not my fault, not my problem. I'll go back to what Jesus said. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me water. When I was naked, you clothed me. And he says that anything you do to that, to another person, you're doing it for me. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to accept strangers into my home. I got a perfectly good barn. But I think at every chance that we get to help people, we should. That is one of the dividing lines as a Christian, being that light in the world versus the other world where it's all hoarding and keeping everything to themselves. You should be willing to share. If not, I don't ever want to be judged the way that the rich man was judged when he refused to give food or medical attention to Lazarus, his servant that was sitting outside of his gate and dying. I don't ever want that incident. So when need be, I'll always be there to help. I believe that's one of the part of our ministry that we're being raised up to do. I know Jamie Walden feels the same way. There's a lot of us who are out there who were previous lives. We were protectors. We went out, fought wars. Now here we are. We don't know what to do with ourselves, but we still have the same drive. I think if you commit yourself fully to God, God will reassign you. God will give you the right mission that you need to be on, and just follow it. Just follow it. The moment we start to The moment we start to insert our ego and all of our little wants and our little stupid problems that we have in society, a lot of things deteriorate within God's plans for us. It's not God's plans, but it's us, right? Like the sin in the camp with Achan after they defeated Jericho. Don't bring anything from Jericho into the camp, right? We have to be following all the things that the Holy Spirit is giving us, which is why you have to be so close into your prayer life, reading in the Bible every day. That I'll not lie to you. There's plenty of times where I feel like I need to be reading the Bible and I just don't. And that's laziness and it happens to all of us. But I know that the more God chastens us to get into his word, to get into meeting him on our knees in the throne room, in our prayer life, the reason why he's doing that, and I think it's part of the birth pains. We have to stay connected to God because the birth pains are coming. I don't think they're there yet, but I think they're coming. And I think when they do start to happen, they'll happen so fast and so violently that the whole world will go into Operation Knee-Jerk Reaction, and you are on your own. For a period of time, you'll be on your own. Some people say buy 6 months of food. Some people say buy a year's worth of food. Some people say buy 2 to 5 years worth of food. Well, if you're like me and you've ever heard these experts and you've considered what it takes to buy a year's worth of food for yourself, you're probably like 99% of us, and you don't have the money to do that. What I'll tell you to do, and I'm like my own worst sponsor. Um, I have companies that sponsor us that probably hate me, and I can't believe they still sponsor us. And I never talk about them. They're always on our shows at the very end. You can see who it is that sponsors us. But I'll be honest with you, probably the best thing you can do is like go down to Walmart or Dollar General, get rice, get beans, get water. I think it's actually better if you get gallon water instead of bottled water. But get rice, get beans, get water, get the basics of what you need, man. Um, and flour, sugar, your salts, and you need to start thinking about getting that in a large bulk amount. And you can do that so much cheaper yourself. Like, have you seen a 5-gallon bucket filled with rice in a Mylar bag? A 5-gallon bucket is a couple dollars at Home Depot. A Mylar bag is a couple dollars on Amazon Prime. A 20, 30-pound bag of rice may not even be $20. And for that whole thing, you can fill that sucker up and get a lid. The lid may be the most expensive thing out of the whole buy. And now you've got 5 gallons worth of rice, and it probably cost you $50 to $60 less than what you would buy by panic buying, by going on to Amazon Prime. I know because I do this all the time. And I just type in survival foods and I just start scrolling and I see the prices of everything increasing. I just go, I can buy this myself. This is too stupid for me to waste my money when I can just piece these things together myself. I'm not doing this no more. So me personally, for all of our sponsors, thank you very much for sponsoring us. I love you very much. But we're getting down to the wire, I believe. We're getting down to X hour, and people need to be getting better prepared. And after what we're about to read, you'll see why I think we do need to get better prepared, because everything that is planned, they have no actionable resources for the people for the event that will happen. I hate using these colloquial terms, but if I keep talking about pandemics in another light, eventually YouTube's going to snag this and take it down. But the events that are coming, from what I gather, not just from my knowledge of being in the government for 16 years, but from what I'm reading currently, it sounds like it's kind of one of those, nah, you're on your own. Yeah. And after everybody's fought for all their toilet paper, and after everybody is done, sheltering in place, then we'll bring everything back together in 15 to 20-minute cities. And that is now your future. And it'll start with all these large metropolitan areas. That's where it'll start. That's why you also see a lot of things going on right now with finances, mortgage companies, um, people losing their homes, especially those of us who are out in the country like we are. You got organizations like BlackRock who are trying to literally buy out everyone and everything. And everywhere you turn, where there used to be a 1,000-acre cattle ranch right down the road, I mean, not 2 minutes down the road, half of it's been sold and they're already building homes on it. And it's going to be another, I don't know. I don't even know what you call it no more because a suburb is not it. When I think about these things, when I look at suburbs, I think of like every one of those little homes as little coffins. That's what I see. Unless you build a redoubt around your suburb and you're patrolling it 24/7 and you turn that into a kingdom for what the future beholds, it's just a new place to be raided. That's nothing hyperbolic or hypothetical. Just look at what happens to South Africa. And we know people that are in South Africa who live in gated communities that have to be patrolled every day by the men in this gated community with guns. One of the raids, I believe they killed both the armed security guards. They hit, I don't know how many dozens of homes. The Afrikaners, I think our friend said that there was at least close to 100 people that attacked this little suburb, and they were just overwhelmed. It happened so fast, they were overwhelmed. And I know here in America, we like to think, well, we got too many guns for you to bring those problems to us. I'm at the point to where now I don't think we really are those people anymore, at least in certain areas. I mean, most of us don't talk to our neighbors anymore. Most of us are not a tight, close-knit community anymore. I know there's outliers, but for the most part, that's not the way America works anymore. And we're so divided by party politics. Just imagine the Civil War happening at the same time, the pandemics are happening at the same time, the elections are happening, and the World War is happening. It's so many things compiled on once. When I look at the data that I'm looking at currently, these are just the runs of events they're occurring right now. They really haven't meshed together yet. So when these things all mesh together, when your economy is turned upside down, you got food scarcity, fuel scarcity. The schools are shut down. Hospitals won't allow you to come in because of pandemics. You can't go to work anymore because of pandemics, or you can't even afford to get to work. And now you're based off the government and subsidiaries from the government who are giving you food, they're giving you money. You're taking loans that you probably shouldn't be. Um, all these things we experienced in 2020, multiple different countries experienced in 2020, and plus the civil uprisings. All these things eventually will affect the United States, like it's happened so many other different countries. And I believe we may actually be one of the worst tyrannical nations to come out of that type of situation. Exhibit A being January 6th, Exhibit B being the 2020 COVID crap. And from there, let's just look at the way politics are right now. Kamala Harris already wants to, when she becomes president within the first 100 days, start gun confiscation. That's probably not going to go over very well. Congress has already said that they're willing to make illegal dang near every type of gun that is out there besides like a single shot, uh, I don't know, breech loading, single shot, like black powdered pistol. That's probably not going to happen either, Congress. We're probably not giving our guns up. So, conflict. The people versus the government. Conflict will happen. Along with that, we see a new rise in weird religious extremisms. I don't want to get too much into that, but the more I read this, where's that book at? Somewhere around here. Here it is. The more I read Preaching in Hitler's Shadow, the more I sit back and I just go, this is our future. That is our future. So I've rambled for far enough. Let's talk about a few things that are happening real briefly that I think will only back up some of my conspiratorial thoughts. And then we'll read about monkeypox. Yay. Okay, so Social Security Administration was hacked. It is now understood that all Social Security numbers have been compromised. I'm sure nothing bad can happen from that. The Trump assassin's body was cremated within 10 days of the attack, and the crime scene was cleaned of all biological evidence ordered by the FBI. Gee, it sounds like they're trying to hide something. Chicago prepares for massive civil unrest with the DNC approaching, I think this weekend, actually. Recently, what happened in New York, was it yesterday or the day before? There was massive protests, smoke bombs, and all kinds of stuff was being thrown at NYPD. And the officials in Chicago are saying that they are documenting anywhere between 800 to 900 to 1,000 people a day are arriving in downtown Chicago and within the area that are there to protest. Now, we know Antifa's there. We know that there's supposedly 100,000 man pro-Palestinian march, protest, whatever is going to be happening, that don't have any of the permits that they're supposed to, so they're immediately going to be considered illegal once the mass groups start up, and you'll probably see riots. My favorite part of law enforcement, riot operations, will probably happen. Most likely, I already know a lot of guys that are on the ground right now that are there, bracing for impact for all this. So, to all of you that I don't even talk to anymore who are there, God be with you. I hope you stay protected. What's interesting is that Chicago said that they're not ready for this. They actually asked for a change of venue. They've asked that the DNC go digital, and that's not happening. So it's interesting to me that you would have the vice president be there and all these other political idiots there. And this is like a tier 1 NSC event, which is National Security event. And they're expecting violence. They're expecting massive violence and civil unrest, and most likely destruction of property. If you're within that area of Chicago, you are now within the zone of where I say you should probably leave. You should probably get away from that area. Go rent a hotel if it's possible. Go stay with relatives if it's possible. Get the heck out of Dodge while you can. And take your valuables with you because it's Chicago. All right, Donald Trump could face imprisonment in September. Some of the new rumors coming out is Donald Trump could actually be incarcerated at Rikers Island in New York, which currently the Federal Bureau of Prisons, who actually did work for it at one point, is now talking about actually taking over that state-run prison, Rikers Island, because it's such a dangerous, grotesque place. The federal government is talking about taking it over. And Rikers Island says that they've been preparing for weeks to have their own wing or an area specifically suited for Donald Trump. We don't know if he's going to have Secret Service protection inside that prison. The way I understand the law is that Secret Service has to stand by a president, former or current. So until they die. So I don't know what that's going to look like. If that is going to happen or not, we'll see, but consider it to be one of the things in the future. Here's a good news for you. The Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency, our sister unit, arrested a Peruvian gang leader and illegal alien who was a mass murderer in Peru, killed over 23 people in Buffalo, New York. A shining example of why the border just needs to be shut down. And by shut down, if Doug was president for a day, which would probably be a horrific thing to do because many of you would not like what I would do, I would send the better part of our military. I was going to say the entire military. I'd send the better part of our military to the Mexican-America border, and I would shut it down completely. We've got the vehicles to scan other vehicles coming through, and we've got the means and methods and the capability to patrol our borders like almost every other country uses its military for, and yet we don't. And our law enforcement is failing us, not because they're failing at their jobs so much, but because the government does not back them up no more. So if there is no true law enforcement on the border, then there is no true border. And at that point in time, I mean, we just caught a terrorist who was coming through the border who's been known terrorist from the Middle East. And like, this is a really bad dude. He's just one of millions. He was one of millions that's been caught. So, like I said before, the border it's not porous, it's open. There is nothing stopping any of these people. And we're just eventually we're eventually going to see the consequences of these actions. And the FBI, Christopher Wray, so many bad things I want to say about you, but he has been warning, which is a sham and a joke because it's his FBI that's been letting people go, but he's been warning that we're going to have something worse than a 9/11. We may have multiple 9/11s happen. I don't know. But the amount of terrorists that we have in this country right now, and they haven't done anything, tells me they're planning on doing something. So, Ukraine has successfully invaded Russia. Ukraine successfully invaded a Russian town called Kursk. Evacuations are now underway. This morning, I've been watching videos of the elderly and children and the disabled who are, they're having to be taken out of their homes, put in a vehicle, and just drove, I believe it's northeast to be able to get out of that area. They've declared a state of emergency in multiple different cities and counties of that area, provinces. I don't know how Russia describes their localities. But right now, the force of Ukraine, like let's say if this circle right here is Kursk, they're coming around in a pincer-like movement, and they're going to completely cut off Kursk, and then that will be enveloped into Ukrainian patrolled territory. That's the way it's looking like it'll play out. I think it's very strange that Vladimir Putin hasn't done anything. Now, I'm not saying he's not going to do anything. Me and a few other veterans were talking about this the other night. Why not repel the attack? Why not go and invade right now? Or is it better to sit and watch and just have the place evacuate and not instigate any action or confrontation and gather intelligence and plan and move strategically all the units that will be needed to overtake that town again? I don't know. But I know right now is that NATO assets are being used to invade Russia. NATO assets that Russia will say is American. Ukraine is an American asset. Ukraine is using British and French and American equipment of war, to include Lindsey Graham just recently in Ukraine, who is saying, well, they now got their order of F-16s, and we'll be looking for retired NATO F-16 fighters to come and pilot these F-16s because they got so many F-16s, they don't have enough Ukrainians to fill it, to put seats in those cockpits and get them up in the air. And now they're looking for people from NATO countries, to include America, who are retired airmen to come and fight for Ukraine. I mean, this is America's war. All day long, Russia knows that it's America that's pressing this fight. And eventually, Russia is going to say, we've had enough. We have backed off. We've given you room. We've tried to negotiate. We're trying to control our area. You're trying to push us out of everything. The blowing up Nord Stream pipeline now appears to have been done by Ukraine. And Zelensky had over $300,000 in assets dedicated to that operation, and the CIA knew it. And I still will connect American and Norwegian assets to that. One way or another, there was NATO involvement in the blowing up of those two pipelines. And Germany is now looking to actually prosecute Ukrainians who were involved in it. So it wasn't the Russians who blew up their pipeline. What about that false narrative that we got fed for a year? And the Taliban has shown off in a prestigious, massive parade all the American military equipment and vehicles that Joe Biden left behind. It would not surprise me to see the Taliban either redistribute, as they already have been, this American equipment to their allies, or to use it in an invasion upon Israel, upon any of our other allies that are in that area. And that will be absolutely 100% America's fault. It's not our fault personally as civilians, but it'll be our fault in general as a nation. You can see this going multiple ways. You can see that our instigating the war with Russia, our instigating a war with Iran, our instigating a war with China, eventually we're going to write a check that we can't cash. And the best president to do this type of conflict with, the best president to have this type of buffoonery, to have the worst case scenario happen to the United States, is under Joe Biden. He's the best scapegoat America has ever created for a world war, for an economic collapse, for a pandemic. This dude is like, he was born for this. And that's what I'll be watching. That's why they won't take this man out until January 6th, when he's replaced with somebody else. Because if they need to throw a switch and start any of these events, and remember, I've always said that you have narratives connected to events, right? So we've been building the narrative for any one of these events to happen. If they need to gain control, they'll throw the switch. They'll enact any one of these events, the pandemics, the economic collapse, the civil war, civil strife, the invasion of other nations, and then also world war. Because I believe it's all controlled, because Satan is the god of this world, little g. And all the world governments, I believe at this rate, or probably always have been at some point, they're all beholden to their master, and it's not God. So that's what I see happening in the not so near future for all of us. Be prepared, prepare accordingly, train while you can, get your finances in order. Let's read about monkeypox. All right. World Health Organization declares monkeypox a global health emergency. The WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, whatever, told the press, quote, "Today, The emergency committee met and advised me that, in its view, the situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice. The detection and rapid spread of a new clade of monkeypox in eastern DRC, the Dominican Republic of Congo, its detection in neighboring countries that have not previously reported monkeypox, I believe, which is Europe now, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying. It's clear that an international response is essential to stop these outbreaks and save lives. Doug's opinion, if they completely locked down Africa and allowed no export, no import, no travel, and they did all their New World Order desires in the continent of Africa, which is a continent, which I don't believe some of our own politicians understand that, I don't think anyone would care. Besides the people living there, I don't think anybody would care at all. When you start to care is when all these rules and laws and regulations and restrictions starts to approach you. Here in Texas, I would not care so much if the lockdowns and restrictions were happening in New York. I would just say, probably shouldn't live in New York anymore. But if it went from New York and creeped its way down the East Coast and then started making its way westward, now I'm going to start to get a little worried. But that's the way people react to things. You don't really care until it's happening in front of you. Most people, my wife and I were talking about this yesterday, most people don't care about the consequences of their actions, like the sins that they commit, until they're in front of the bema seat in front of the judge who tells you, "Go away from me, I never knew you." Then we care about hell. Then we plead. Then we cry. Then we beg. And then we're drug out of the court and we're thrown into a place of never ending fire. Sometimes you don't care about these consequences until it's right in front of you. You don't care about sharks in the ocean until you're out in the ocean. I don't care about many things happening because I'm not close to it. But that's not the way governments work. The government is always around you, it's always near you, and it always affects you. Like, let's even say Joe Biden. The stupid antics and things that Joe Biden wants to do or has done has not exactly affected me and my household coming through my front door yet. But with one executive order, it can happen. And that's the way governments work. And with what we saw with COVID and the lockdowns, we saw that government was prepared to lock down, just like with 9/11, government was prepared for spying. All the policies were wrote, they were in place. And then the narrative of overreach connected with event. And could this be a catalyst for one of these events where we have another round of government overreach? Yeah, quite possibly, actually. Let's continue. So executives from Moderna said in June that they were initiating a research program to look into creating a mRNA monkeypox vaccine. It's quite interesting that the expert research scientist, Dr. Judy Mikovits, has been warning that monkeypox viruses have been found in vaccines since the 1990s, including the simian virus 40, being found in the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. If this live stream doesn't get shut down, it's because God's hand is truly on us. God, please do not let this live stream get shut down or taken down. Please let us get through this entire thing. I ask in the name of Jesus. Amen. I just felt that in my heart. I needed to pray that real quick because we're about to read some nasty stuff. All right. So the document I'm about to go over is from November 2021, and it is called Strengthening Global Systems to Prevent and Respond to High Consequence Biological Threats. Results from the 2021 tabletop exercise conducted in partnership with the Munich Security Conference. I will have a link to this in the description after the live stream is done with. The first live stream was, I guess I screwed it up some way, somehow. So I have links to some of these things that I've been talking about, and I'll make sure that they're in the description. I'm super horrible about putting links to anything, so I'll correct that on this one. All right. This is a lot of pages. I'm going to read it in its entirety. It's 36 pages. We're not going to read all 36 because there's only like 15 pages that are pertinent. But I just want you to hear what they've been planning since 2021. Maybe this can spark some reaction in your brains. Here's the first page, acknowledgments. These are the players, all right? We may hear of these people's names in the not so distant future. The authors gratefully acknowledge the support of those who were instrumental in the development and execution of this senior level tabletop exercise. First, we'd like to thank our partners at the Munich Security Conference who jointly hosted this exercise with NTI. We are also grateful to the exercise participants whose valuable insights, expertise, and engagement were crucial to the success of this project. We also thank the TALUS, TALUS Analytics. For those of you who love researching all this stuff, you may want to figure out who these people are. TALUS Analytics, TALUS, for developing the epidemiological model underpinning this exercise. Our expert advisors who informed the design of the exercise scenario earlier in the process, and long story short, for producing the exercise videos at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, which is who created all of this that we're about to read. The Nuclear Threat Initiative, who is apparently into pandemics now. We would like to thank the members of this project team. So these are names that we'll probably hear in the not so distant future. Dr. Andrew Hebler, White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. That's where he's at. And then doctors James Yasif or Hame Yasif, and then Kevin O'Prey. They facilitated the scenario-based exercise. Christopher R. Isaac provided valuable research assistance. Amanda Kogan was instrumental in organizing the exercise event. All right, forward. Oh, globalists. Over the past 2 years, the world has faced the devastating impact that a biological event can have on human health, economies, and political stability. As of this writing, the SARS CoV 2 virus has infected more than 250 million people, killed more than 5 million people, and caused trillions of dollars in economic losses. COVID-19 has revealed that national governments and the international community are woefully unprepared to respond to pandemics, underscoring our shared vulnerability to future catastrophic biological threats that can meet or exceed the severe consequences of the current pandemic. Although national and global leaders are appropriately focused on the immediate demands of the COVID 19 response, the international community cannot postpone implementing the steps necessary to protect against future biological threats. Right here, just within the forward, I thought that this was pertinent enough to actually read verbatim because, by the way, they write these things. This was 2021, by the way. It's now 2024. They are ready the moment the lever needs to be thrown whatever the heck they've prepared, they're ready to install it immediately. And all the world governments are on board. There's 196 governments that are on board with this already based off of what I've been reading with the WHO. So let's continue. This must include the recognition that while naturally emerging pandemics continue to pose a significant threat, the next global catastrophe could be caused by the deliberate misuse of the tools of modern biology or by a laboratory accident. What they're talking about is the staging of one country using a biological agent upon another people or a terrorist organization who is in cahoots with a laboratory who is now, like, let's say it's Israel, Palestine. Israel says they developed some sort of pathogen that can kill all the Palestinians, while the Palestinians say they've created a pathogen that'll kill all the Israelis. And these two countries are about to sling them both at each other, and it spreads around the world. All right, that's just wait. They've already talked about that in here. All right. The next global catastrophe could be caused by deliberate misuse of the tools of modern biology or by a laboratory accident, fundamentally strengthening the preparedness of every nation to meet these challenges is a humanitarian imperative in the collective self-interest of the international community. Even the most prepared nations will remain vulnerable as long as significant biosecurity, which means lockdowns, and pandemic preparedness gaps, which means restriction of travel, remain in countries around the world. We are only as safe as our weakest link. Which, who's the weakest link? It's us. We're the weakest link. The world has witnessed how global travel, trade, urbanization, and environmental degradation can fuel the emergence and spread of infectious disease threats. However, the serious risk embedded in the very bioscience research and technological advances that offer vital opportunities to counter these risks remain less understood. Bioscience and biotechnology advances, while offering tremendous potential benefits, also presents opportunities for accidental release or deliberate abuse of biological agents that could cause as much or more harm than COVID 19. Scientific and political leaders must take bold action to safeguard the global bioscience and biotechnology research and development enterprise to ensure that catastrophic accidents or deliberate misuse do not lead to the next global pandemic, which is, according to the WHO, happening right now. To strengthen international capabilities to respond to the next pandemic, national and global leaders must build stronger public health and medical response capabilities that can scale to address very high consequence biological events, potentially orders of magnitude more severe than what we have experienced during the past 2 years. We cannot afford to be reactive. We must build our public health and medical systems to be anticipatory, responding energetically and proactively in the face of uncertainty, taking what humanitarian and crisis response communities describe as a no regrets approach. Okay. Like I said, I'll have a link to this. It'll be in the description. It's 36 pages. I highly advise that you read this, because they're telling you right here on page number 4 at the bottom of the paragraph, we cannot afford to be reactive. In 2019 and 2020, we were reactive. Now, what they're describing 2024, I'm guessing, and beyond, is no longer reactive. We're just not going to tell you, out comes the fence. No, you cannot go this way anymore. Return to your homes. That's the future. That's what they're willing to do. It's a no regrets approach. I have no regrets that you can't go to school no more, kid. I've got no regrets that you can't go see your family no more. I've got no regrets that you're now having to decide what you can eat versus what is still available for you to eat. Doesn't matter to me anymore. It's a no regrets approach. It's how we save the world. I'll believe that when the president and Congress and Senate is actually sent underground. When that day happens, prophecy has hit the fan. Until then, I sit back and I go, this is all unnecessary. I know because I've been a part of these plans and operations. This is all unnecessary right now. We're being subservient. This is a beta test. So that forward was wrote by Margaret A. Hamburg, medical doctor, interim vice president of the Global Biological Policy and Programs for the Nuclear Threat Initiative. It kind of goes back into that interesting conversation Dave Hodges and I have had many times where we hear that Joe Biden has signed us on to more or less being subservient to the WHO whenever they say everything gets locked down and they take over the world. That's the document. That's the lady who came up with the idea. All right, so here's the executive summary. In March 2021, the NTI, Nuclear Threat Initiative, partnered with the Munich Security Conference to conduct a tabletop exercise on reducing high consequence biological threats. Conducted virtually, the exercise examined gaps in national and international biosecurity and pandemic preparedness architectures and explored opportunities to improve capabilities to prevent and respond to high consequence biological events. Participants included 19 senior leaders and experts from across Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe with decades of combined experience in public health, biotechnology, industry, international security, and philanthropy, which our favorite Dr. Fauci was a part of this, from what I gather. The exercise scenario portrayed a deadly global pandemic involving an unusual strain of monkeypox virus that emerged in the fictional nation of Brinia, Brinia, and spread globally over 18 months. 18 months. How long should we prepare for? Sounds like 18 months sometimes. Ultimately, the exercise scenario revealed that the initial outbreak was caused by a terrorist attack using a pathogen engineered in a laboratory with inadequate biosafety and biosecurity provisions and weak oversight. In North Africa, I believe a year ago or 2 years ago, there was a terrorist organization who broke into a BSL biosecurity level, I believe 3 compound and stole unknown amounts of bioweapon agents. I believe you can go and look that up right now and prove me wrong or right. But if my memory serves me correct, I do believe I remember hearing about that. Strange. Let's continue. Ultimately, the exercise scenario revealed that the initial outbreak was caused by a terrorist attack using a pathogen engineered in a laboratory with inadequate biosafety, biosecurity provisions, and weak oversight. By the end of the exercise, with the fictional pandemic, resulted in more than 3 billion cases and 270 fatalities, 270 million fatalities worldwide. The discussion among the exercise participants led to the following key findings: weak global detection, assessment, and warning of pandemic risk. The international community needs a more robust, transparent detection, evaluation, early warning system that can rapidly communicate actionable information about pandemic risks. Gaps in national level preparedness. National governments should improve preparedness by developing national level pandemic response plans built upon a coherent system of triggers that prompt anticipatory action despite uncertainty and near term costs. In other words, on a no regrets. So, by this anticipatory action, despite uncertainty, is well, we think this event is happening. We think the spread of this pandemic is happening. We're just going to shut everything down. We're going to lock everything down. No regrets. This is us stopping the spread. And that's just how we're going to deal with this. That's a no regrets approach. Gaps in biological research governance. The international system for governing dual use biological research is neither prepared to meet today's security requirements nor is it ready for significantly expanded challenges in the future. Oh, that's not good. There are risk reduction needs throughout the bioscience research and development life cycles. So, once again, the international system is saying that the security risks are so great that there are risk reductions that need throughout the world to be done with bioscience research and development. That's your inoculations. Okay. That would be, I guess, that would be the procedures for how to move forward with safe distance, restriction of travel, stuff like that. Insufficient financing of international preparedness for pandemics. Many countries around the world lack financing to make essential national investments in pandemic preparedness. From there, they're talking about the little countries who can't afford to do all of this stuff. All right, so to address these findings, the author developed the following recommendations. I'm very used to the government realm of having vulnerabilities and recommendations. And so we've heard about the vulnerabilities. Let's hear about their recommendations. What should the world do in order to prevent this? 1. Bolster international systems for pandemic risk assessment, warning, and in investigating outbreak origins. Just consider World War Z and when Brad Pitt goes to the beginning of where the zombie virus started. That's about the best that we can do. The WHO, this is the recommendation. Okay, so you heard the recommendation. This is the bullet points to it. The WHO should establish a graded, transparent, international public health alert system. I bet you that would get tied into our phones some way, somehow, because it already has. Remember with the COVID thing that pop up on anybody's phone? You know, this COVID's broke out in this area, and you get that little reminder. Next one is the United Nations system should establish a new mechanism for investigating high consequence biological events of unknown origin, which we refer to as a joint assessment mechanism. All right, number 2, develop and institute national level triggers for early proactive pandemic response. So, national level triggers. When this event happens, throw this lever. Bullet point 1 says national governments must adopt a no regrets approach to pandemic response, taking anticipatory action as opposed to reacting to mounting case counts and fatalities, which are lagging indicators. A must, not should, not a recommendation, a must. Now remember, 196 nations have agreed to be a part of this document. I don't know to what extent they'll go through with it, but you can almost expect every first world nation will do exactly what I'm reading. To facilitate anticipatory action on a no regrets basis, national governments should develop national level plans that define and incorporate triggers for responding to high consequence biological events. All right. Recommendation number 3, establish an international entity dedicated to reducing emerging biological risks associated with rapid technological advances. That is worrying. That is super worrying to even consider that. An international entity. At this point in time, is this an international entity like the international world courts that Israel doesn't play nice with, the United States doesn't play nice with? Will there eventually be a international, I don't know, restriction travel agency, pandemic agency that can say, hey, sorry, Parker County, Texas, where you live currently, you can no longer travel outside of this realm, and we're blocking off all roads, all air traffic, and all logistics coming in and out of that county because no regrets. We got to stop the spread. Grandma's got to survive. Here's our suggestions to go along with this recommendation. The international community should establish an entity dedicated to reducing the risk of catastrophic events due to accidents or deliberate abuse of bioscience and biotechnology. To meaningfully reduce risk, the entity should support interventions throughout the bioscience and biotechnology research and development lifecycle, from funding through execution and on to publication and commercialization. Was it Australia or New Zealand that had, for any of you that are in the crowd that are from Australia and New Zealand, was it you guys who had the COVID camp where you were forcibly removed from your home and put in a little COVID camp trailer, and your entire life was restricted for like months and months and months if you ever popped positive for COVID? They created concentration camps. I believe they did that also in other parts of Europe. They did it possibly in Canada, or they were trying to implement it in Canada. They absolutely did it in China. That was a terror show to watch. All those apartment buildings be completely locked down, people being welded into them, doors chained, patrolled by the military and police. We're one Kamala Harris, or what some people like to say, Kabbalah Harris presidency away from seeing that with gun restrictions or confiscations. Moving on, point number 4, develop a catalytic global health security fund to accelerate pandemic preparedness capacity building in countries around the world. National leaders developed development banks, philanthropic donors, which would be who? George Soros, and also who? Bill Gates. And the private sector, you already know who those people are, should establish and resource a new financing mechanism to bolster global health security and pandemic preparedness. There's your cyber dollar right there. The design and operations of the fund should be catalytic, incentivizing national governments to invest in their own preparedness over the long term. And point number 5, establish a robust international process to tackle the challenge of supply chain resilience. The United States Secretary General should convene a high level panel to develop recommendations for critical measures to bolster global supply chain resilience for medical and public health supplies. All right. You can go on to read about the exercise and the exercise scenarios. Um, I want to read to you about the scenario design summary. So, the discussion was organized into 3 sequential moves. This is the way the scenario-based training was created, the tabletop exercise. So, the 3 sequential moves corresponding with scenario developments, followed by a roundtable discussion of broader biosecurity and pandemic preparedness issues. The step by step approach to revealing scenario developments reflected the limitations of information available to real world decision makers, as well as the resulting uncertainty associated with a pandemic of known origin. All right, so if you're going to go and research this, go to page 10. And for any of you right now, I believe you can actually go and look this up. If you go to nti.org and look up NTI paper bio TTX, the PDF should pop up. You'll know it's 36 pages long. You should be able to go straight to it and look at this. So this is the last page I'm going to talk to you about, but it starts off with the figure 1 scenario design summary. All right. May 15th, 2022. It talks about move 1, a scenario, monkeypox outbreak in Brinia. 1,421 cases and 4 deaths. No international warnings or advisories. That's June 15th or June 5th. Key issues were international alert and warning systems, benefits of and need for early risk assessment. All right, move 2, January 10th of 2023. 83 countries affected, 70 million cases, 1.3 million deaths. So this isn't even a full year from what they're determining. And you're going to have 83 countries affected and 70 million cases and 1.3 million deaths. Monkeypox engineered to be vaccine resistant. National responses and effects of early action. Let me ask you something. If monkeypox is vaccine resistant and then the governments find out about that, then what do they do to the affected victims? You can't have freedom of movement. What are you allowed to do? And what will they do with your body? Is everything a cremation? Is everything a, hey, get a shovel, dig the ditch with all your neighbors, and then bang, you fall into the ditch? International supply chain challenges. So here they're saying that the key issues is benefits of a predetermined triggers for national response and international supply chain challenges. It appears that what they want more than anything right now is the ability to enact these triggers. And the trigger, which they probably already have, and we probably won't know until it happens, uh, may soon actually be explained to all of us. If this monkeypox outbreak or whatever the next outbreak is, because I'm going to read a few others to you. Influenza, vaccine-resistant polio is all over the world right now. When they say it's time to initiate these predetermined triggers for national response, we may not actually have the time to react to prepare then ourselves. That's why I'm saying get prepared now, because chicanery is coming and they've been planning on it for a couple years now. All right, move number 3. This scenario is May 10th, 2023. Previously, we were at January 10th. So this is what, 2 months later? 480 million cases. We went up from 83 or 700 million cases to 480 million cases and 27 million deaths when we were at 1.3 million deaths. So what is that already telling you? That is telling me that not only is this a very virulent strain, but it ends up killing most of the people who contract it at the same time. If that's what they're planning on, if that's what they're thinking is going to happen, in my mind, there's probably something already created that fits this narrative. Key issues are biosecurity and governance of dual-use bioscience research. Roundtable. All right, so this was December 1st of 2023. The 3.2 billion cases is how many that they said would happen within 1 year. 3.2 billion cases. 271 million deaths. That's what they predict. Global differences in national responses contributed to significantly variable outcomes. Their key issues were international financing for pandemic preparedness and measures to strengthen national pandemic preparedness capacity. So you can go through and you can look at all the rest of this. I highly encourage that you do. Prepare wisely while you can. All the governments around the world apparently have been. And it just seems to me that the day they want to say, enact the triggers, it's time to go into overdrive, start throwing the levers, locking everything down, they're going to have all their P's and Q's in a row. And instead of the government's being reactive, we're going to be forced to be reactive and be on our own. And the only thing they'll have for us is stay in your house, get this inoculation, 6 feet distance or 200 feet distance or whatever, and restriction of travel, not going to work. You're going to get your COVID checks again. And if this is as virulent and as deadly as they surmise that it may be, this may last for more than 1 year. It may last for 2 years. It may last for 3 years until the pandemic dies out. And then what could the world economies look like by then? What would the world system look like with 3 years of lockdowns? I don't know. Probably not good. Hyperbolic, maybe. It's all a theoretical, but this is what I'm paying attention to very closely right now. And I say that because the threat of biological agents is always there. It's been developed. Everything that you could ever dream of, like the worst case scenario, has already been developed for a long time. And we have enemy states who have access to it. And I don't know who's producing all the medicines here in America, but if I'm still correct, it's mainly China. China, Canada, not the US. So we're not prepared for it in that stance. Anyways, that was a tabletop exercise out of the Munich Security Conference for the NTI, the Nuclear Threat Initiative from 2021, called Strengthening Global Systems to Prevent and Respond to High Consequence Biological Threats. So if you want to get into your Googler account and you want to look this up, NTI paper, strengthening global systems to prevent and respond to high consequence biological threats. This is just like Event 201. And we saw that with Event 201, it predicted the future. This is, to me, the same thing. So, uh, guys, that's all I got for you right now. Vindicta Solutions, we will be actually doing a recording here, which is within a few hours. We're going to be talking about some other things that's going on around the world, how to better prepare, talking about some of the classes that we got coming up. I strongly suggest, once again, at this point in time, to prepare as best as possible. Don't break the bank, but prepare wisely and accordingly, and get very, very close with your Lord. Stop all the shenanigans and sinning in your life. Get as close to God as possible and stay under the shadow of the cross, because that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing. We love you all. We thank you very much for all your support. This is almost a completely demonetized channel at this rate. So, you know, we basically live now off of your donations or buying merchandise. That I even hate saying that we've become that type of organization now, but buying merchandise off of our website at AmericanVindictaShow.com. But we do have some cool t-shirts and hats and mugs and stuff. We will be developing hopefully some better designs here soon. That's all I got, guys. God be with you all. Stay frosty. We'll see you next time.